Hello, my name is Mystery. Last video we talked about the end of feudalism and the age of kings and church rule and the beginnings of new thought, technology and discovery, known as the Renaissance. Where we left off specifically was with the recognition of a new rising class of people from this old feudalistic world. A group of people who I think are overlooked in conventional history teachings, or, if not overlooked, left out of the discussion. This is the rise of the merchant class or middle class. You may have heard people use the term bourgeois before. This is them.
My name is Mystery. For reasons unknown, I have been thrown back into the past almost 100 years, and this is my story.
Bourg, in French, is an old name for a strategic town, and bourgeois are townspeople or city folk who began to rise in prominence and power around the time of the fall of kingdoms and the breaking up of the all-powerful church throughout Europe. So, there is this time in history, and again this is a very Western perspective here, that some historians will refer to as the Bourgeois Revolution. It is characterized by the rise of a merchant and entrepreneurial group of people into positions of power in society. They basically take over from the absolute rule of kings and queens, but they didn't just do this overnight. So to understand what may have caused this bourgeois revolution, we have to look at the context of Europe after the Renaissance, from roughly the 1600s to the 1800s, a time where various groups and cultures were fighting over religious differences and territories. Kings and aristocrats were also struggling and warring in order to keep their old powers, and all the while the general population are caught in this crossfire and subject to significant collateral damage, displacement, and bouts of famine and starvation. All of the fun things associated with warring upper classes. So in summary, it probably wasn't a very pleasant time to be alive for the average person. It should also be noted that while feudalism was crumbling, the peasants, the people who worked the countryside and the farmland, were being increasingly displaced from the countryside, and so needed to find new places to live and work in order to survive. And where else can you go but towns and cities? So towns and cities started to become increasingly important on the world stage. They started becoming the new areas for producing goods. During this time, from the 1600s to the 1800s, there are numerous physical or violent revolutions, including the English Revolution, the French Revolution, American Revolution, some of which we will cover in future videos. But the Bourgeois Revolution is not one singular event. It's important to understand that it's a period of time, stretching a few hundred years when power transfers from the old rulers to the new ones, from monarchs with divine rights to merchants and leftover aristocrats with new property rights, from kings and lords who inherit their social status by birthright to free people who can afford their social positions. So what are the achievements of this bourgeois revolution then, you may be asking yourself? Well, due to the rise of this middle class and their thirst for education and science and learning and philosophy, etc., they began to use their new power from wealth accumulation as a trade-off to make the world a better place for themselves and their interests. And so they searched and debated ideas of freedom, what it means to be free, and how that translates to create a society that lets one with property be free to do whatever they want. So this idea of freedom was Absolutely revolutionary. The idea that you didn't have to pay homage to a king or a church and you could accumulate your own money and property was simply groundbreaking. And so, this middle class needed a way of organizing this brave new world. And so we have the rise of parliaments and republics, systems of representative governance. Not for the general population, no, but for the new middle and upper class, the bourgeois and the bourgeoisie. Now you're probably watching this and thinking, well, that's quite depressing. Humanity swapped one tiny class with all of the power to a larger class with all of the power. That's not very revolutionary at all. And you may be right, but why the bourgeois, or the middle class revolution, as I like to call it, is so important is that it really tackled ideas of freedom and by doing so made it a global matter. It affected the entire planet. The fact that you have ideals of freedom in your life right now is thanks to a bunch of property owners who thought, I'm sick of paying ridiculous taxes to kings and churches. I want to be free to live my own way and govern myself, which is very much the thinking that you guys have today. However, let's not get carried away here with utopian fantasies of... At the time of the bourgeois revolution, it was more about free trade and freedom for property rights than freeing humanity from oppression. But it got the world thinking about freedom nonetheless. And so, across the world, it wasn't just the middle and the upper classes this revolution would affect. No. This gave new awareness to the peasants and slaves and workers of the world. These usually oppressed and exploited masses, for the first time, began to think, hey, freedom is possible. So maybe it's possible for everyone, not just the bourgeois and the bourgeoisie. The bourgeois revolution, the middle class revolution, gave the average people of the world their own revolutionary dreams. That is why it is undeniably important for humanity. The reason why you, people here in the 21st century, live with aspirations of freedom or delusions is directly a result of the rise of the middle class and this revolution. Now, if you have any other opinions of what has been covered here, please let me know in the comments below. If you've liked this or found it interesting, please like it and share it. And remember, until next time, I am, you are, we are a mystery.